Well, hello there and welcome to another edition of The Big Q. Today we are talking about infrastructure. As you would well know, Africa's infrastructure is crucial for Africa's growth and development, especially for the countries to become more globally competitive. While the demand for infrastructure in Africa is rising, only 4% of the countries in the continent give this priority, especially in this area. And that's why today I'm joined by Lynda Aphing KOUSSI, who is the director and founder of KOUSSI, and ahead of the 5th Conference of the Public Works and Infrastructure that is slated for December. Thank you very much, Lynda, for making time to be with us, and of course, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Fiona. Hello.
Hi. So let's just go straight to the facts and statistics, of course. You know, according to AFDB, Africa will need at least $100 billion at least per year to be injected into infrastructure. But of course, we've known infrastructure has always been a challenge in Africa. It's not a new thing. It's not a new song that we're singing today. Why has this always been an issue? Why are we lagging behind when it comes to infrastructure?
I want to always be positive. So yes, it is true. We need that 100 billion to be injected every year in order to ensure that our infrastructure are growing. But we are probably lagging behind, in my view, because we are not involving the right participants, and probably because we don't yet see the need to correlate the hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure. And we have such a beautiful dividend demographic, being the youth and the younger generation. We need to start now capitalizing on this in order to ensure that the policies that are going to be put in place for the infrastructure are settled, the strategic planning are fully implemented and followed, and we need to ensure that we have a corporate governance in place that we have to stick to and follow in order to make sure that not every year we're going to be sitting down here and saying the same thing, but we're going to be, on the contrary, talking about the progresses that we see. Because yes, we're still a bit behind, but there are progresses being made, and it's important to talk about those progresses as well, and that's what we'd like to do. So they just remain the successes that we've had, and they become that positivity that we need to obviously just stick to in order to keep growing.
Of course, now we know that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area was launched, of course, right here in Kigali.
Yes.
But then we also know the need for inter-trade that will help the region and the continent to grow. Do you see this happening if infrastructure is given a priority? Because currently it looks like we have not yet given it a priority. Do you think it's time the government set this as among the top 3 agendas for each and every country in the continent?
Oh, absolutely. It has to be at the forefront of everybody's planning. It has to be at the forefront of every leader's strategic thinking, because it is the future and it is the best way for Africa to develop and to sustain that economic growth. Because it's all well and good to develop, but you need to have a sustainable development. Therefore, you need to ensure that you're following the right practices and you're ensuring the best practices. Yes, the intra-trade was set up here in Kigali, and it's a wonderful thing. Now we are at the implementation phase. We shouldn't obviously just try to, if I can use that word, jump before we even start running. So we obviously we will see the changes, because everybody is now talking about it. And I'm from West Africa, and I'm doing a conference in East Africa to ensure that we obviously just keep this kind of development and this kind of trade, this kind of conversation across the continent. So those are going to be the ones where we feel that we don't have to compete against each other, but we need to have the open doors to ensure that we develop together and at the same pace. So it is a major focal point for the development of Africa. Yes, it is.
Speaking of policies that you've just mentioned, what, in your opinion, let's say the 3 top things that governments should give or work on to ensure that this is moving in the right direction?
Governance, governance, governance. It's the key. To me, it is the key point. Once we have a great governance set up and we follow the governance that's in place, because governance covers everything. It's about the anti-corruption, it's about how to invest, it's about making sure that we have the correct policies for any investors coming in. It's about ensuring that every potential development is going to be sustainable for the population. It's about ensuring that the population, the well-being of the population are the forefront of everything. So governance is not just something that we need to think of as a judicial or just another legal aspect, because it encompasses everything and everybody. So to me, we need to get to that point, and then we will move on to the political will. which will be followed by the desire of the population in their heart to share that, that common development across the continent. So governance is a key point in Africa, because our main issues are around corruption, are about lack of implementation of strategies. We have a lot of strategies. That's why a lot of people will tell you we go to so many conferences, but we can't see those the result of those conferences being implemented, and it's because of the lack of governance. And that's what we need to ensure that we educate ourselves about, and we educate our youth about the understanding of what the governance is about, because we can set something up today and we're ensuring that they will follow the front. And that's why I obviously just make sure that the youth and the younger generation are always at the forefront of those communications, and they know what it's all about. So I will stick to this, the governance, the governance, and the governance.
But how do we bring then in the citizens? Because like you just mentioned, you know, citizens complain because most of these you know, should I say policies or are made up in conferences where the elite meet and discuss, then later on, you know, it trickles down to them. So how do they feel part and parcel? Because I think it's very important that they are part and parcel of this journey, even as Africa continues to grow.
Exactly. That's another part. The governance includes this, includes the population, it includes our decision, because we call them elites, but in essence, we place all these people there. And we need to remember this. So they are just the bearer of our decisions and what's necessary for our development, and the political will then follows it. So I would say that it is possible. I mean, we need to even start by being very positive, because it is happening at a slow pace, but it is happening. And the implementation of those good governance are taking place, because we're making sure that everybody knows about it. And the conferences are there to remind people of their obligation to the population. And we need to have a shared and common goal, which is our development. And that's why it's so important to feel African, to feel one, not to feel from one specific country, because once we feel that Africa is for all of us, we then have that common goal, which is our economic development, because we know that we have a place for all of us around. So that's why we need to ensure that we keep nurturing, and then we keep teaching to everyone around us to ensure that those policies are implemented, because what belongs to you, you always want it to be perfect. Therefore, that is the teaching that we need to give.
So the inclusion, what we
the
call
social
Uganda,
inclusion,
especially in
Rwanda. It is one of my favorites, actually, I have to say, because it gives such a great social responsibility. It creates such an amazing sense of belongings and sense of togetherness. But it also creates the desire in everybody's heart to only just deliver the best and keep that excellence at the top. So it's not, to me, it's not just a day out of the month where you go out, but it's a day where you remember that it belongs to you, and nobody else is best placed to make it work than yourself.
Absolutely.
So it's important.
Corruption has always, you know, been the top key. When you talk of infrastructure, they say we've lost 5 billion, we've lost 10 billion, yet this is money from the taxpayers' pockets. This is the money that people will have to pay back eventually, and generations will be affected by this. How do we curb this vice? Because it has always been there. Corruption has always been there. It's always, sadly, been, you know, side by side with the continent's name. Africa, corruption. Africa, poverty. How do we get rid of this and even attract more investors into the continent?
I'll say that we're getting there. You're a perfect example. I mean, we need to ensure that we take a leaf out of the great nations that are doing it well, and without any sort of complexities, without feeling that someone is doing better than I am. We just need to feel like someone is doing a great job, and we need to follow suit. And some countries in Africa are fighting corruption, and that's why I was making mention to the political will. It's important for the leaders to ensure that the place that they have is to carry the needs of the population to the world. Therefore, what they're doing, it's not only for them, what they're representing, it's not just them as a sole person, it's an entire country, it's an entire nation. So it's important to have that sense, again, of belonging, that sense of togetherness, and wanting better for where you come from and who you belong to, the sense of community. It is important. But we also need to ensure that we're going to stick to the rules. If someone is caught doing something that is about corruption, we need to be able to ensure that these people are going to pay the price. And then we see that in some nations we're slacking, and we're very reluctant to put the people that we even know behind bars, and to even put the people that are doing wrong, or teach them a lesson so that everybody else knows that it's important.
Absolutely.
Because everything goes through hard work. And lesson has to be taught when something is not done in a right way. Because right now, and the year and the century that we're in, we are only in for excellence. And corruption has to be eradicated. It is possible. It is possible if we apply the right rules. I mean, rules have to be, rules are not, they exist, and they need to be implemented.
I love how you're optimistic about Africa.
I am so optimistic. Because I believe we need to be like this. We need to be optimistic about Africa. It is ours. And if we are the negative one and pessimistic about Africa, everybody else is going to come and take everything. And then in the end, we'll be there and we'll just have our eyes to cry. So we have to be optimistic. And this is a dream of mine, and I am so sure that it will happen, so sure that I can't even touch it.
Let's talk about the PPPs, the public-private partnerships. You know, you've been in this sector for quite a long time, of course. Where do we go wrong as Africa when we come to negotiations? You know, we have seen countries who come and actually threaten Africa, yet we are in our own continent. We are, you know, we are comfortable where we are, but yet they come in with so many tedious negotiation skills that we say can't afford or can't take, but we still take the money and move along. Where do we go wrong?
I'm glad you've asked this question. I used to be a banker for about 15 years. So PPPs and negotiations, they've been my cup of tea every single day. I used to add a bit of honey in it, so it just became a bit good. But it's, again, knowing your worth. Africa needs to know its worth. And Africa needs to be proud of what it has. Even if it's a bunch of dirt, just be proud of your dirt. Especially when someone comes and says to you that he wants part of that dirt. And I'm putting it into this, this image just so that we can see that we are called poor nations, we are called corrupt nations, but yet again, we have quite a lot of investors that wants to come and invest. Therefore, if it's corrupt, it's meant to be a pack of dirt. Therefore, we need to be proud of that dirt. But it's about how we're transforming that dirt into cleanliness and into impactful package. That's what we need to think about. So we need to know our worth. Even if somebody out there is telling us that it is not worth anything, we need to ensure that we know that it is worth something. And it's, again, if someone comes and wants something, it's because it's going to generate something better and greater. Therefore, we shouldn't have any issues in refusing something that sounds tedious or sounds unfair, because at every given point something else will come along.
Let's not accept everything that's brought to the table.
Let's not accept everything because we want everybody to come, because we want, if we know that it is not going to be sustainable for our nations, let's learn to try and convert it into something that will be more sustainable for us, because we are best placed to know what we need. Nobody else should tell us what we need.
Absolutely.
We know what we need, and we need to ensure that we are confident enough when we're telling everybody else what we need. And it's only in this way that we can then negotiate. And we shouldn't fear any negotiation. Negotiation go wrong sometimes. And it's okay. It's okay. And it's a good learning curve for us to obviously just grow and then change our ways of doing things.
Do you think there are models maybe that one can, you know, copy from, if we should use the word, you know, learn from, and say maybe this worked for this particular country, can we adapt this and, you know, say no probably to China for now and, you know, move on?
If we know that it's not going to be sustainable for us, why are we taking it? Because clearly there are privates. I was even talking about that yesterday. We have private sectors, or we have local companies that can bid for certain projects, and they're overlooked because certain projects have such a high tender that they can't bid. So we need to obviously just favor our local companies, our African companies, and try and see how we can have joint ventures across Africa to ensure that we do what we have to do, but ensure that everybody that comes to our nations to try and invest or try and develop or expand their own business has the same goal as us, a shared winning. It is not a winning for just one party. It's got to be a shared winning. Therefore, we need to ensure that the profit is going to be evenly divided. It's got to be a win-win, even if it's not cash advances, and even if it's not, you know, 60%, 40%. We need to ensure that the gap or the number of years that we give those investments are not too long in order to cripple our countries later on down the line with all the interest rates. So we need to figure out every angle. We need to look at every angle, but we also need to train ourselves into what we're doing. and into what everybody else. So if we see that we have a lot of companies, a lot of countries coming to our country to try and invest or to try and build or to try and teach, we know also that means that we're doing something good. So we need to emphasize on what we're doing. We need to train ourselves more so we are more capable of negotiating because we have the capacity to do that. So it's important to ensure that we carry on with the training, we carry on in participation of debates, conferences, instead of saying there's so many conferences in Africa. We say everywhere, when you repeat something, it's part of the learning curve.
It is.
Therefore, those conferences, you just need to ensure that you go to those conferences and then you try and get the best out of those conferences as opposed to just going to just sit there and then have some lunch.
So in short, Wake Up Africa, not everything brought to the table should be eaten.
No.
We do take a short break, but when we come back, of course, we keep touching on and we head straight to the conference and what it means for Africa and what we can learn and what are the case studies that will be spoken during the conference. Do keep it the Big Q. And welcome back to the Big Q. Of course, we have been told, Wake Up Africa, not everything that's been brought to the table should be eaten, especially if you know you're serving a good dish out there. We were talking about infrastructure, but I think it is also important to mention the role of women in this, because when we talk about construction, you'll not find lots of women in there. You'll not find even women engineers. Let's just start from there, and not as many as there should be there. How do we attract more women into this area?
It is true, there isn't a lot of women, but we're talking about the hard infrastructure. So infrastructure has every other domains beneath it, because infrastructure is needed everywhere, hence the importance of infrastructure. But we have the hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure. Yeah. And in the soft infrastructure, you'll find a lot of women. A lot of women. Why? Because we have the irrigation.
What do you mean by soft? Yeah,
exactly. In the soft one, we have the education, we have the irrigation, we have the planning for youth, we have the development, we have the social housing. In the hard, we have the roads, we have the ports, we have all those drilling, those big gas butane that we see everywhere being built. That is part of the hard infrastructure, and it's where we need women, because we need women on the strategic boards to give the ideas, along with the male, but also women to be on the front of in the field to ensure that every angle are covered. But women tend to be impacted the most by those, because should there be anything or any issues, it falls back into a woman that is meant to be assisting or probably covering up or finding solutions. Well, in fact, she should be at the forefront of everything else to avoid any wrongdoings from happening. Therefore, women need to be included a little bit more. But what we tend to also overlook is that the social housing project, they started years ago by women. We have social entrepreneurs in Uganda and Kenya that are working on social housing, and this has been seen for years. And today, what we see is that the social housing is the key denominator in the infrastructure to develop. So women had been put on the table years ago. Social housing would have probably, who knows, been on the table a while ago. It is important. It is important. The inclusion into the infrastructure is necessary, and at every level. And we can see that it's starting to happen. It's starting to happen. We have now our seats, and it's not even a seat that we need to be, I'll say, begging for. It is the seat for everyone, because the decision needs to go through everyone, because a change of mind, a different idea, a different feel about an idea, a different use of our intelligence, emotional, could help develop or grow a business, or could even just kill the business.
Absolutely.
Therefore, it's important to make sure that we include everybody, because no one should feel at the back of what's being done for the development of any nations. Otherwise, that's how we create animosity, and then development tends to lag behind.
It does,
it is very important.
Yeah. So the 5th Conference of Public Works and Infrastructure that is slated for December, what can we expect from this conference? What's new, because someone would say we've had infrastructural, conferences before. What do you bring to the table that's a bit different, and what can we learn from this?
Absolutely. So 13th and 14th of December, we'll be talking about the soft and hard infrastructure. We will be making a parallel on few focal points that are the artificial intelligence, therefore the world of digital and the infrastructure for the development. We'll also be making the parallel between infrastructure and education, but mainly infrastructure and the youth.
Oh.
So the demographic dividend I was mentioning earlier on, how is it utilized? How can we optimize whilst using this? We have green housing, we now have green economy, we have smart and resilient cities. Okay, who are they for? How can we make sure that they're deemed and built for everybody, to cater for the population and for everybody to see the importance? And in order to do this, we will obviously just be doing a lot of case studies. It's not just a conference to hear our own voices, if I can say it this way. The importance is for people to attend these conferences, create synergies, create partnership, because we're putting on the table banks, investment funds, investors, architects, civil society and private sector together to discuss the issue that they have and together find a way of going over these issues, because once we find a way of going over this issue, we then have a common voice which could be taken then to all the political leaders for them to have something to take and ensure that it fits in with all the needs of the population. So that's what this conference is going to be doing, and it's important that we don't see this as a platform where someone just wants to invite people to just come and talk. No, it's important for us to see and understand what we have and see and understand where we can find the synergies, find the right partners and the right places to invest and how we do that. Because through those case studies, we'll have explanation. What project was built? How was it made? Where did it not work? And what lessons could we learn from that? And then the next year, we know that we're following through the right policies to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So it's important. And obviously, we have a part that's dedicated to women. It was impossible to do it without that. So we have the part where it's the women and their impact on infrastructure. So it's important for the whole of the actual community that works within that sector, even out of that sector, to try and come and learn a little bit more, because once we learn, and knowledge is power, once we learn, once we have the right knowledge, once we have the right partners, we can ensure that we will obviously develop. And we're going to be working with the ALU, so the African Leadership University students. So they will be part of those discussions. They will tell us exactly how they see the work that's being done. They will give an appropriate feedback. And they will obviously just give their needs. And from them we can learn. We can learn to develop. And that's what we need to do. We need to give the voice to everybody. We'll also have networking sessions, so people could obviously just match their needs to the people that are going to be participating and then discuss where they have to discuss. We need to ensure that time is a priority. So we just stick to our time, ask the right question, hear the right words, and take it back to make sure that those investments are for the greater good of Africa. So that's what's going to be different.
So this is the fifth conference, meaning you've had the first, the second, the third, and the fourth, you know. So what are the lessons that you've learned over and over throughout the 5 years that you've run this conference across the continent? I
remember the first year where I thought it was just a conference and everybody just had to come and obviously share their views. And then from that first year, I learned that we needed feedback to grow. So for the second year, we made sure that we had a lot of feedback being given to participants. For the third year, I thought, okay, partnerships are not growing. Investments are not growing. What is happening? And then we made sure that the people that were there were the right people that needed a project to expand, the company to expand. So it's explaining who is going to be there and being the matchmaker, so to speak, to ensure that everyone that's going to come has a dedicated slot, to ensure that they're not coming for 2 days and not getting anything out of there. So it's about studying companies, studying who they are, studying what they want. So it's developing in terms of training ourselves to provide something that's going to be more needed. And then the fourth year, we had again the conference and partnership were created. And I was very proud. But it wasn't enough, because when you aim for development and you aim for success, you need more than 1-2 partnerships, but you need real sustainable partnerships. And then I decided that we needed a lot of case studies so we can learn from our mistakes and grow together. And that was even given as a feedback to our company by the participant, saying that it would be greater to have case studies in order to develop. Hence the different changes. So every year we add something completely different, which is needed and necessary for the people participating to ensure that we fit in.
Is there a fee, as we sum up? Is there a fee? Do I have to pay something to be part of this conference?
There is a fee. There is a fee of $250 for corporate, So private companies, $250 for their participation, and we are welcoming students. We are welcoming SMEs as well, because at the back of that we will even have an event where we're trying to award the 100 leaders of Africa on the last day. So we're welcoming students because it's important that we show them what we need, and we're definitely welcoming SMEs or people that have projects. And obviously the doors are open for all other corporates, because we've invited a lot of corporates from Côte d'Ivoire, from Senegal, Cameroon, and few corporates from London and the US. Therefore, we are waiting for private sector here.
Well, thank you very much for making time to be with us, and of course, good luck ahead of the conference.
Thank you so very much. Thank you very much.
Well, I've been speaking to Lynda Aphing KOUSSI, who is the director and founder of KOUSSI. And of course, we've touched a lot on infrastructure, but I think the most important takeaway would be infrastructure, be it small or big, it all starts with you. Take care of the small infrastructure that you have around you, even as we hope to grow for the continent and the whole of the, globally, so that we can be globally challenged as well. Well, do keep it the big, and remember to keep sending in your suggestions on who you want to see on the show. And of course, my name is Fiona Mbabazi. Do keep it Rwanda Television.